Thank you. And now I'll open the floor to questions. Does anyone have a question for any of these panelists or all of them? Yes. Maggie? She'll bring you.
So I have a question for Janelle.
You have to turn it on.
Oh, so I had a question for Janelle. I noticed on your biography it said that you were sort of while going through your studies having children at the same time. So I guess there's some questions in how you even balance out how much time did you need off to sort of have a brand new baby and things like that.
It's doable.
It should be on.
It's not that easy, effectively. Rolling the baby stroller while typing the other hand. It's certainly not easy, but if you like what you do and you certainly like to be a mom, it's doable, but it means a lot of time and effort.
Thank you. I'll ask one. A few of you talked about outside factors like husband, spouse, children, and I'd like to know what influence they made on your decisions. So how they influenced your choices to go to certain universities or not to. I'll ask the question to all of you, so you can all answer. Whoever wants to start.
I can start. Well, after I finished my PhD, the reason I moved to Montreal was because my husband got a job here. In fact, he's a colleague of Tracy's. He's a professor at McGill.
We did our undergrads together, actually.
That's true.
In physics?
Yeah.
Is he a professor in physics?
Yep, yes.
Oh.
Ashish Clark.
Okay.
I won't say anymore. And I did find that challenging. Like, I think I was very happy to move to Montreal. It's a great city to live in, but it is also challenging. I've never lived in Canada. I was not Canadian. I grew up in India. After a decade, I got used to how things worked in the US, and then came here and realized it's completely different. I had no network here. I knew nobody here. So it took a while to set up all these systems. Like, you do things because you have one reason for doing them, and things work out in the end.
So as I mentioned, I moved to Ottawa because my fiance at the time had the job in Ottawa. And just to mention as well that physicists tend to end up together. Well, my husband has the same background as I do. He also has a PhD in neuroscience. We came from the same lab. But he's older, so he left the lab right when I entered, and so we missed each other. But we were long distance for 6 years, and so that was difficult for sure. He did 2 postdocs in the States, and so because he was still moving around a lot, I decided that I was going to stay at Concordia to finish my studies, because that was also very important. That's something that I didn't, want to forsake. And so I was definitely staying in Montreal until my studies were done. He was doing his thing, and we said, okay, at one point we'll be in the same country, same city. And we just had to wait, and it happened when he finally got the job in Ottawa. That 2-hour difference from Ottawa to Montreal was fantastic, because before he was in St. Louis, Missouri, which was quite further away. And like I said, as soon as I was in my studies, then I moved to Ottawa. But because I was interested in science policy and granting agencies, Ottawa was actually the best place for me to go. So it really, really worked out very well. So yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just trying to I've been gathering my thoughts as I've been listening to everyone else. I think, so one of the things I mentioned when I was introducing myself, I'm sorry I can't see you guys over there, is that I do think, and I give this advice to my own students, I think it's extremely important for you to be happy and satisfied with your life as you're doing your physics degree. And moving towards whatever goal you have. I certainly felt at times that my entire life was on hold while I was trying to reach this goal, whether it was putting off having kids or living. So I also did some long distance for about 1.5 years with my partner. and of course, that has its own problems. Stepping back, we've all kind of ended up with people in physics or in similar areas, and as I said, this often happens. There was a time when I wasn't with my husband, and I was dating other people, and frankly, that was one of the hardest things I found, was trying to explain to someone outside of the field how important this was to me, why I had to stay home on a Saturday night because I had a quantum exam on Monday, why I was planning on moving to British Columbia in a year, right? And being told, well, see ya. And so you end up with these people who not only can you have a conversation about quantum mechanics if you so choose, but it happens. But they also understand the pressures and the demands and also your dreams. And that is something that I find it's very important. And when I finally found it really sustained me, being able to come home at the end of the day and just complain about the referee on my paper who clearly doesn't understand the point and he's an idiot and what am I going to do? I'm going to quit the field. I can't do this anymore. And they know where you're coming from. But that said, so it's worth it, but it's hard. So we spent a year and a half apart. I was in the Netherlands. He was finishing his PhD in Toronto. We decided not to have kids until we had permanent jobs. So I was 35 when I had my, which is no longer that old, but certainly there was a time when women even waited until they had tenure, and then you're pushing 40, right? So, there are women who are having their third child when they're over 40. But that said, all of my friends from high school who are in more standard careers are having children as well. So, and I think now too, just to add, you can have a family while you're studying. It's hard, but there are more and more people doing it, men as well. And there's maternity leave for students in place now, not undergraduate students, but graduate students. And so it's doable. And you just gotta, my advice with family is that you just have to pick the life outside of your career that supports you and makes you happy and plow forward. And realize that everybody's got challenges that they have to face, so.
I was just wondering, what you guys, anyone really, what you thought about doing your undergrad and graduate school at the same university versus going different places, because kind of starting to think about that and wondering what the right choice is.
On my point of view, it really depends on what you want to do. If you want to be academics, you certainly want to be moving. If you want to be medical physics like me, I don't think it's really changing anything.
So definitely exactly what you said. And in my case, I stayed at Concordia for my whole studies. I knew I didn't want to have the PI position, so that was okay. And just to talk about the granting agency side, when you're applying for even scholarships, and especially just for scholarships, so where you did your studies matters. You really want to be moving around more. So especially when you get to the postdoctoral level, you actually will not be able to stay in the same university where you did your PhD to get awarded by a federal granting agency. You have to move. So it's just different level, different skill levels, different experiences. So that's very encouraged.
I would just echo that. So the standard wisdom is that you should always, whenever you have an option to change, you should change. There's always exceptions to the rule. You can have a successful career by staying in one place, with the exception that, so I'm talking about your studies, at the end of your PhD, you will have to go somewhere else. That's something to keep in mind. If you want to end up somewhere, you probably shouldn't do your PhD there. That's, again, there's always exceptions. Brigitte is an exception. I mean, well, not your PhD, but yeah, you went away. But you did your undergrad at McGill. I think the most important thing is, in my opinion, for science, the most important thing is that you're working with good people doing a thesis that you love, and you have the support to succeed. And so there are lots of people who have stayed put the reason they stay put is because the top person in the world in their area is already where they are, and why would you move?
Okay. I just had a question. Since this is like a women's in physics conference, I was wondering, in your opinion, if it's sometimes people say, oh, it's harder to be a woman in physics because there's so many men, and other people say, no, it's easier because they want more women, so you're at an advantage being a woman. So I was wondering, like, in your opinion, is it like neutral, advantage, disadvantage? How do you kind of see that? Good question.
It's probably going to be a whole panel.
For me, I think it's neutral. There's a lot of women in medical physics. I think it's probably the fields that qui attire le plus de femmes. So it's really neutral, but I never felt apart being a woman, even at the bachelor degree. It's my experience.
I think I would have to say neutral as well, based on my own experience and what I see around me. You will encounter people who tell you that women have an advantage in physics. I don't think that's the case at all. I think the disadvantages that we have outweigh then that's no longer neutral, but there's there may be a few scholarships which are aimed at women. And it may be true that faculties are trying to get more women on staff. But if you look at the numbers of women, there's also a lot of women who are dropping out because it is difficult. I think, though, my experience in physics is that it really is largely merit-based, as we heard this morning, and quality does float to the top. So once people respect your science, and they don't give you, nobody wants a subpar physicist working in their facility, so no one's going to give you a job because you're female. At the same time, most people will really respect your science and won't even consider the fact that you might have to take a maternity leave at some point. So I think it's totally neutral.
I definitely agree with everything people have said here. I do also want to add one more thing. You will definitely encounter situations where people think you've got the job, you've got the position that you have because you're a woman. You have to learn to ignore that. There's no merit to that. It's hard to ignore it. You have to learn how to ignore that. The other thing that I have seen, like I've taught a lot, I've mentored students, grad school, even in law firms, there is a tendency, this is not being sexist at all, it's based on empirical evidence. Men do tend to think that they're better than they actually are. Women tend to think that they're worse than they actually are. You may have heard this before. I cannot tell you how true it is. I know it's true for me. I know it's true for everyone I've worked with, both men and women. Everyone agrees it's there. It just is. You have to be aware and, I don't know, balance your opinions and expectations accordingly.
I just wanted to say one more thing about that. I think that's a really good point. I think most of the difficulties that women face in physics, I don't want to say are self-inflicted, but it's not overt discrimination or overt favorism. One of the largest problems, I think, is this problem of underestimating your own talents and confidence, especially because not only are you in a field that is so challenging and so difficult in itself, but you're also in that field with the cream of the crop, right? Everyone around you is smart, everyone around you is driven, and most of those people are men who have a lot of confidence in their abilities. I would also just add, so in addition to your own limitations, I think it is still true. Okay, so I might get in trouble for saying this, I'm being taped, but I think it is still true that, you know, I never noticed I was female, well, in physics until I had kids. And then it was just different, right? So the expectations of women around family, and not just when I had kids, but also as my parents got older as well. You know, and just things change. Your position in the world changes. You're no longer the daughter. You're actually the person running everybody's lives. Sorry, I forgot what I was saying. Right, so I would compare, you know, now my own husband is of course my partner and completely pulls his weight, but I would compare myself to my male colleagues who are experiencing similar, you know, things in their lives, but have different support networks, or, you know, I mean, they're not breastfeeding, okay? Like, there are some physical things that make it difficult to meet with your graduate students every week when you're on mat leave, because you have another human being to feed every 3 hours, right? So, and these are things that they just don't encounter. At the same time, it's more likely for a man in physics to have a wife who will follow him everywhere, who may work part-time. She's the one who may take a full year off when they have kids so he can come back after 3 weeks. These are just realities of our society that make it more difficult for women to push forward. And I don't know that it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just the way it is. And that's what's harder. It's not that there's some old sexist guy in the department who doesn't want you to have a job.
Speaking of pushing forward and having that confidence in yourself, was there any point in either sort of before the final, like getting your PhD, was there any point in undergrad or master's where you just kind of were like, you know, I shouldn't be doing this, or I can't do this, or anything like that?
Every day.
Yeah. Basically.
And I don't think that's physics only, just you do a PhD and so academia.
When I was in school,
Yeah.
if you chart your emotions, it's
Quite normal, unfortunately.
Well, I would just say that, yeah, so I think it's completely natural to go through that. And again, it's for reasons that we've just discussed. You're always pushing the envelope, you're always challenging yourself, you're surrounded by great people. But as you move forward in your career, you will gain more confidence. And at some point, you just sort of hit this groove. And I remember that there was this, I don't know, it was almost like a turning point where I suddenly realized I was in this room with a whole bunch of experts. And I don't know, it dawned on me that they didn't really know that much more than me. And the stuff that was, okay, so how do you realize this? At some point you're in a room on a committee or in a conference and some big shot says something that you know is completely wrong, right? And they say it like it's the truth, and you know it's not. And you realize that we're all, you know, everybody's learning, everybody's trying to show their own intelligence, everybody's trying to network. And the best thing you can do is just really focus on yourself, focus on your own knowledge, your own science, and your own abilities. And just keep reminding yourself that you are as good as everybody in that room. You're probably better.
Yeah, so speaking of a lot of like various international, experiences about like in the upper grades. I'm actually an international student here. I've been studying for like about 9 to 10 years in Canada. So like I'm very loyal to, like I feel almost like I'm a Canadian, but only my citizenship is not Canadian. So like always when I'm trying to get this like research opportunities, I'm always blocked by these scholarships or fundings, and especially NSERC never supports international students, really sadly. So I'm very limited to like these opportunities to like have like if there's any major topic that I really wanted to get into, I wasn't supported. I couldn't be funded, so I couldn't even apply for it. So I want to ask, you if you have any advices for like students like me.
As a professor who takes on students, it is difficult because there are less funding options and it's frustrating. I have American students who I can never get fellowships for. However, most of the undergraduate students who have worked with me have not been on scholarship, and I have paid them myself, or there's other pots of money. So I would advise you to think outside the box a little. Like, don't just look at the fellowships. Walk into people's office and just convince them that you're good enough. Even volunteer a little bit, and then people will see that you have the skills that they need, and they'll pay you. Because we can pay you out of our own research grants, but there's no strings attached there.
But do you pay more for the international students, more money?
No, there's a going rate for a summer student that we pay everyone, and it just depends on your year. The difficulty there is that you just have to convince the professor to spend money on you, because it is money that is supposed to be spent on research.
So the last question is, what advice can you give to undergraduate students like us in the third, second, maybe fourth year? Yeah. About anything.
I think a lot of things have already been said about networking, getting out there, trying different things. One more thing I would maybe add is if you are going to go on the job market, practice interviewing. It might seem silly. I say that from personal experience. I crashed and burned my first interview I had in Ottawa. Horrible. It was horrible. It was a learning experience. It never happened again. I at least learned from that experience. But there are resources available to you. I think most universities have centers, career centers, where you can go and actually have mock interviews. Or practice with a friend. It really would make a big difference. And if you do crash and burn, pick yourself up and keep going, and it'll be okay. It works out.